Potential case, 2 missing juveniles. Abigail Joyce Williams.
Getting scared now. It's getting cold.
Liberty Rose Lynn German.
Missing, abducted, we don't know for sure.
Last seen at the High Bridge in Delphi, Indiana.
Delphi is just not one of those places where any of us ever thought that something like this would happen.
Despite that video, despite that audio, nothing happens, seemingly, for 6 years.
The judge did find probable cause for an arrest of Richard Allen. He's been charged with 2 counts of murder for the murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German.
Richard Allen, you child murderer! Why did you do it?
No, they got the wrong guy. There's no way.
There are other people who were looked at for this.
Shame on you!
It's some sort of a religious sect/cult
Shame on you, Richard!
that follow Odinism.
Shame on you, Richard Allen!
I believe they sacrificed a girl and killed another one.
And law enforcement insists no one's ever been cleared.
Baldwin, can you provide any comment?
Journalism. It's time for you guys to start being journalists.
Delphi is a small town. The downtown is 2 blocks. It has a main street, literally a main street, old courthouse, wonderful restaurant called the Stonehouse Grill, which has amazing breakfasts. And it just has that regular America, small town cliche almost, flavor and feel.
Downtown is surrounded by lots of fields, corn and soybean, and lots of farmland.
The historic Trails of Delphi is a popular spot in town for people to go to. It's a little bit outside of town. It's just a beautiful place filled with trees. You could hear nature, you could hear the birds chirping. It's a very serene place.
I live pretty close to the trails. Dropping your kids off at the trails was just something that you did. It was just what kids did.
And just off the trail, there's an abandoned railroad bridge, the Monon High Bridge, 63 feet above Deer Creek.
The Monon High Bridge is not that serene. It's this old, rickety bridge, or it was at the time, right? The rail ties are falling apart. It's, you know, you could look down, take a couple steps and look down and see a 100-foot drop below you.
I mean, it was a very high bridge. The name definitely applies. I grew up watching people post on their Snapchat stories, like going to the bridge to like read a book or things like that, and they'd have their feet like swinging over the edge. My name is Cynth Rossi, and I was best friends with Abby and Libby. I first met Abby when we were in preschool together. I spent my entire childhood basically at her grandparents' home. We just loved being little girls and just sitting on my bed, reading magazines, playing with makeup. She loved playing dress up. That was one of our favorite things to do together. I first met Libby when we were in classes together in elementary school. She just had such like a spunky personality. She was constantly saying the funniest things I've ever heard in my entire life. I've seen this picture a lot. It was during one of her swim meets. She loved swimming and how much she was such an active kid. She seemed to never run out of energy. She was constantly going. The picture that I'm often cropped out of. So this was our solo and ensemble competition with the song Home on the Range that we could not agree how to play. And Abby's actually wearing a dress that my mom had gotten her for Christmas. I'll never forget that day, February 13th. It was around 2 p.m. I saw the picture of Abby on the bridge on their Snapchat stories, and I immediately just knew that something was wrong. Taken by liberty, it should have just been them being kids on a day off from school, but unfortunately it turned into a lot more.
Potential case, 2 missing juveniles. Liberty Rose Lynn German, last seen at the High Bridge in Delphi, Indiana, at approximately 1300 hours. Second juvenile, Abigail Joyce Williams, surgical was last seen wearing a gray zip up sweatshirt and a red shirt with a red shirt under it and jeans.
On the afternoon of February 13th, 2017, Abby and Libby were dropped off at the trails that lead to the Monon High Bridge. They were supposed to be picked up by Libby's father at 3 p.m. They never turned up. The search started around 5:30.
Well, upset, confused, obviously very distraught. Just worried. All I want to do is have the girls get home safe. Missing, abducted, we don't know for sure. There's a cell phone tower, but the ping was last noted about 5 or 6 hours ago. They say the phone's now dead.
Word spread quickly that help was needed, that these girls needed to be found. Hundreds of people turned out and searched through the night. Becky Patty, Libby's grandmother, would say that you could see flashlights everywhere like stars in the sky, like fireflies. It was a full town effort.
Ravines, ditches, trash cans for phones, any sign of the girls.
I was like, I think one of them just like fell off the bridge and maybe broke their leg, and then the other one went down to help them and maybe they got hurt.
All options are on the table. Did they run away? Did they go to a party? Did they fall off the bridge? Did they get injured? No one had any idea what had happened to them, but the official search was halted that night and picked up the next morning.
The next day I went to school and it was just gloomy.
Hundreds of people showed up, searching all over the place. Hope was high, and then the word came.
I learned that Abby and Libby had been found when I saw everybody in the hallway just crying. No one said the exact words to me. And we just sat on our phones and watched the news headlines start to come in.
We have found 2 bodies about a mile east of town. We are investigating this as a crime scene. We suspect foul play.
They didn't identify them as Abby and Libby, but everyone knew.
I knew it was them. I wasn't in a position to hear it. I just was truly traumatized. Like my body was just in fight or flight. I didn't know exactly what all foul play entailed, but when my mom started to tell me someone hurt them and someone wanted them to die, for me it was so difficult to process. News stations started showing up to my house. I couldn't enter my home without someone asking, "What happened? Do you have any information?" And I'm just trying to process the fact that my 2 best friends were just murdered, let alone trying to balance a media presence at 13. Like, it was so terrifying.
Basically, we have identified the bodies of the 2 females that were found out yesterday. Abigail J. Williams, 13, of the Delphi area, and Liberty Rose Lynn German, 14, of the Delphi area. Family has been notified. This is considered a double homicide investigation.
Yeah, I had known that Abby and Libby were active on some kind of sites where you could meet new people, and part of me thought that that might have something to do with it, that maybe they had met someone online.
We have nobody in custody at this time.
The next day, police released a picture of a man on the bridge. He appears to be wearing a blue coat, blue pants, and boots. They don't say where this picture comes from, but they do say that they are looking for this person and they want to talk to him.
When I first saw that image, I just wanted to solve it immediately. I was flipping through every single person I'd ever seen in my entire life who might walk like that, who might appear like that. And The first thing that I noticed when I saw it was the pockets. That they were filled, that there was something along like the waist area. And to me, I just immediately was like, that's either a knife set or a gun.
At this point, no one knows where this picture had come from, so speculation was rampant. Was he caught on a trail cam? And if they had that image, what else did they have? This picture had actually come from Libby's phone. She had captured that image. Not only that, she had also captured his voice.
And for the first time, we hear that this man is the prime suspect in the murders of Abby and Libby.
Finding out that Libby had recorded him, I felt proud of her.
And then in July of 2017, police release a composite sketch. They say that the man they're looking for in the sketch is between 5'6" and 5'10", weighs between 180 and 220 pounds, and has reddish brown hair.
I couldn't think of anyone that I thought looked like that, but then again, I thought of everyone who looked like that. Like, he just looked like every other guy I'd ever seen in this town. I couldn't place anyone specific to the sketch, and that was frustrating.
Who was this person? Was he a trucker passing through? Could he have been a drifter? Was he a serial killer? This is really when the people in town started to pay attention and start to look around.
I've done numerous interviews with police officers, FBI, investigators, and they all, I mean, when you get asked, do you have any answers, you just want to have an answer, but I didn't.
And then 2 years into the investigation, a whole new direction.
To the killer, who may be in this room, we believe you are hiding in plain sight. We likely have interviewed you or someone close to you, and you want to know what we know. And one day, you will.
A couple of new things come out of that presser. They add one word to the audio from Libby's phone.
They also released this much younger sketch saying that he could be as young as 16 at the time of the murders.
I thought to myself, oh my gosh, they have no clue who did it. And I was like, if they don't know, if the age range is from 16 to 40, like, I was like, do they know anything about him? Do they have anything at all? I was hopeless. And that to me was my worst fear, that they wouldn't end up arresting anyone and they would just become another case.
Despite both of those faces, despite that video, despite that audio, despite the fact that Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter said, this person probably lives here, he's probably a neighbor of yours, no arrests are made for 6 years.
Coming up.
I am proud to report to you an arrest has been made.
I think everyone's first reaction was, who?
Well, here we are, guys, on Ron Logan's property. This is Deer Creek. The Monon High Bridge is over that way. And over here is where the bodies were.
This case has been going on for a long time, and a lot of names have come up over those years as potential people who could have been involved in this crime, and none of them have been cleared. Ron Logan was one of the first people that police took an interest in, for many reasons. One, yes, the girls' bodies were found on his property. That's going to raise questions. But also, he was out there on TV early, doing interviews, giving tours of the crime scene, telling people where he was and when.
Who would have thought they'd let their children out to do something special that day, take a trip down, and then turn out a disaster like this?
Within weeks of the murders, there were 2 search warrants executed at Ron Logan's property. The first one was just looking for guns, and they found 156. The second search was directly related to the murders. Ron Logan gave me a copy of the probable cause that was used to get that second search warrant for the search of his property. And in it, the FBI writes that they believe he is responsible for the murders.
There are a couple key pieces of the Ron Logan probable cause affidavit. Perhaps the most compelling part of it is that he constructed an alibi for a crime that had not yet been discovered.
He lied about when he left his house to go buy tropical fish. He had a suspended license. He shouldn't have been driving at all.
Detectives with the Carroll County Sheriff's Office and the Indiana State Police have uncovered an online profile named Anthony Schatz. The fictitious Anthony Schatz profile used images of a known male model and portrayed himself as being extremely wealthy and owning numerous sports cars. The creator of the fictitious profile used this information while communicating with juvenile females to solicit nude images.
We know that Libby was at least friends on social media with the Anthony Schatz profile and that he at least liked or commented on some of her posts. Kegan Klein from Peru, Indiana, about 40 minutes away, admitted he created that fake profile, and I spoke to him from jail.
Are you aware whether you may have talked to Libby on the 13th?
That's what they said. That's what the police told me.
That you did?
Yeah.
And do you have any recollection of that?
No, not at all.
Did you have anything to do with the murders of Abby or Libby?
Not at all. And I gave up my DNA, a hair follicle test. I've done everything they wanted me to.
In October of 2022, surprisingly, we got word that there was an arrest.
What? You know, disbelief. Like, okay, I'm hearing this, but it's a process.
Like the rest of national media, I showed up to watch that press conference to announce the arrest, not knowing what to expect.
Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation.
We expected to be excited and happy and like overjoyed that he's arrested, but now we're dealing with understanding that there's a lot of reopening wounds that's coming with that.
My name's Dan Semitovich. I'm the producer and co-host of Down the Hill, the Delphi Murders podcast. My first reaction, I think everyone's first reaction was, who? We had no idea who this was.
Richard Allen, you child murderer! Why did you do it? Shame on you!
My name is Nicholas McClellan. I'm the Carroll County prosecutor. Mr. Allen has had his initial hearing. He's entered a preliminary plea of not guilty, and he is in custody. He's being held currently without bond.
Here comes a guy that has never, ever been announced. He was nobody's radar. It was like, where did this guy come from?
Richard Matthew Allen was 50 years old, had no criminal history, and worked as a farm tech over at the local CVS in Delphi.
I was surprised because he seemed like a real nice guy and everything, waiting on us in the drive-thru and everything.
I had not interacted with him, but everyone knew who he was. I mean, he worked there for so long. And when I found out who it was, I never in a million years thought that it would have been him. Not someone so integral to the community and to the Delphi experience.
Richard Allen has been married to Kathy for 30 years. They have 1 daughter.
Allen was raised in Mexico, Indiana, about 40 miles from Delphi.
Mexico is a very small town, smaller than Delphi, with a population of about 1,200 people.
That's where Ricky Allen lived, over there in that yellow house, early on. I think when he first got married, they moved in there, if I remember right. Very, very nice, very respectable. young man. I mean, always has been.
Yeah, my name is David Yoder, and I knew Ricky his entire life.
He is a very loyal dog.
He's a quiet he's very polite, always has been respectful to me. He'll go out of his way to say hi, just to say hello to me. Very friendly, sociable. I really can't speak highly enough about the man. I just can't believe that he did this. I don't believe it for a minute.
People who I've talked to who shopped at the CVS and dealt with Richard Allen described him as friendly. In fact, after the murders, Libby's aunt went in there to have some pictures printed for Libby's memorial. She said Richard Allen helped her, and at the time, she thought he was helpful and kind.
I just wanted to ask him, why would you do something like that? Why would you take such two innocent people from this world? Why? What was your motive? What did you want to do? What were your intentions? Did you know all along that that's what you were going to do?
But we still didn't know why he had been arrested. And they said in that press conference that everything about that was still under seal.
This is really important. While I know you are all expecting final details today concerning this arrest, today is not that day.
It's very unusual for what happened in this case to happen, and especially a case of this magnitude, which is why. That's the reason why. When a case is so high profile, a case that's gone cold for so many years, and there are obviously things that, for some good reason, we as members of the public just shouldn't be privy to.
Prosecutor Nicholas McLeland also said there could be other actors involved in this crime.
Where are those people? Where's that second person? Why haven't we heard anything about it?
Then Sheriff Tobe Lesenby of Carroll County asked the court to move Richard Allen out of the Carroll County Jail, saying they couldn't ensure his safety. So the judge agrees, signs off on that, and sends him to the Department of Corrections. And then the judge immediately steps down from the case.
And what happens is he's moved without a judge who had recused himself, claiming that the bloodlust of the case was just too much for him to handle, and he didn't think that he'd be able to sit on it.
Allen is moved to the Westville Maximum Security Prison. That's pretty unusual because usually suspects are held at the county jail.
With Allen in prison, without defense attorneys, and now no judge on the case, the Indiana Supreme Court steps in and they appoint Special Judge Francis Gall, who's from Allen County, about 2 hours away.
Coming up, Richard Allen has a message for the judge.
He writes a letter to Judge Gull, throwing himself on the mercy of the court.
Richard Allen is in custody without bond after being charged with the murders of best friends Abigail Williams and Liberty German.
So in November of 2022, we finally hear from Richard Allen. He writes a handwritten letter, gives it to Judge Gull, throwing himself on the mercy of the court, asking for help paying for his defense.
Allen had originally, when he made his first appearance, had told the judge that he was going to try to get private counsel. I don't think realizing how much a case like this would cost in terms of hiring private counsel.
Carroll County is too small to have its own public defenders. So Judge Fran Gull, she appoints two private attorneys, Brad Rosie and Andrew Baldwin.
Both of these guys have vast experience. I mean, collectively, they've been trying cases for 50 years, both very experienced trial lawyers.
His new defense attorneys, Baldwin and Rosie, immediately release a statement saying he is not guilty. He has nothing to hide. He is 100% innocent.
We also learn more about why Richard Allen was arrested in the first place when the probable cause affidavit is released to the public.
That is what the public is going to be basing their initial opinion as to innocence or guilt on.
We learn that the evidence shows that Abby and Libby are dropped off at the trails at 1:49 p.m. And we already knew that Libby's video recording that man on the bridge happened at 2:13, just 24 minutes later.
We learn that the video has one of the girls saying the word gun. We also find out about some physical evidence. An unspent, unfired .40 caliber round is found in between the bodies.
They then were had examined by an Indiana state trooper who had some training with tool markings. He gave a subjective opinion that he thought that the gun that they recovered in Richard Allen's home, pursuant to the search, was a match.
To me, the most damaging piece of evidence that the state of Indiana has against Richard Allen is the unspent round that cycled through his gun, found just 2 feet away from Libby German. He's either the unluckiest guy in the world, or he was there at the scene when those 2 girls were murdered.
The probable cause reveals at least 4 witnesses. 3 teenage girls and 1 adult woman saw someone generally matching the description of the person in Libby's video between 1:26 p.m. and 2:13 p.m., the time that Abby and Libby were encountering that man on the bridge.
And one of those witnesses is seen on surveillance video arriving around 1:46 p.m. And she says she parked her car and then walked out to the bridge where she saw a man standing on the bridge about 50 feet away. She didn't walk onto the bridge. She turned around and walked back in the direction she came. And when she did that, she passed 2 young girls who were walking towards the bridge. And she believes that was Abby and Libby.
Another witness says that she was driving north of the trails that day, and about 2 hours after the abduction, she saw a man in a blue jacket walking in the opposite direction, quote, muddy and bloody.
Just before Richard Allen was arrested in October of 2022, he met with investigators again after they had resurfaced his name. And he said, yes, I was there. I was wearing a blue jacket. I was wearing a blue pants. I may have been wearing a hat.
One of the other most damaging pieces of evidence came from Richard Allen, in him admitting to being on the trail that day. Think about it. He's admitting to being there from 1:30 until 3:30. And he claims he went there to watch the fish. So how unlucky is this guy that he admits to being present, and his window encompasses the window of time that investigators believe those beautiful girls were murdered?
About 8 months after his arrest, a slew of documents are released. And that's when we find out that Richard Allen has confessed.
His confessions are going to be a major problem for this defense team. We need to have more than that whenever we have a criminal case. A confession alone is not enough. So the state is mounting this case with other pieces of evidence that corroborate what he's admitting to. We haven't heard the confessions yet. We're just aware that prosecutors have alerted the court to the fact that he has made admissions, made them to his wife by way of a jail phone call, and that they plan to introduce that evidence.
So everything we've been hearing up to this point is the theory of the case from the prosecution, from law enforcement. And then, via filings, we start to hear from the defense. And the details that they lay out are like nothing we could possibly have imagined.
Today, like I said, unexpected, out of left field, 130 pages worth of information in just one of the filings that was released. They are pointing the finger in a very specific direction as to who's responsible for this, and it's not Richard Allen. It's some sort of a religious sect/cult that follow Odinism. And it was a sacrifice. Wow.
When that thing dropped, as a defense attorney, it blew my mind. I had never seen a filing like that.
My name is Mark Pitcavage. I'm a senior research fellow with the Anti-Defamation League Center on Extremism. The defense argument that Odinism was involved in the murder is largely based on the idea that there were Norse pagan symbols left at the scene of the crime in the form of sticks or branches or blood patterns. And it's not clear to me that any such symbols were actually left at the scene in the first place. Odinism is one of the branches of white supremacy. There are a number of different types of white supremacy, and it's derived from a religion that is, the easiest way to put it is modern Norse paganism. Modern Norse paganism is the revival of some of the old Scandinavian myths and religious beliefs centered around the ancient Norse gods like Odin and Thor and Freya. Most modern Norse pagans are not racist, they're not white supremacists. The religion as a whole is innocuous, but this one part of it is not so innocuous, it's much more problematic. So at the Center on Extremism, we try and track extremism in a lot of different ways. One of the things that we started doing in 2008 was to track extremist-related murders, where we created a database to track domestic extremist-related murders. Because those allegations were raised, we have been tracking the progress of the case to see if any of them are ever at some point substantiated with evidence. If, and that's a big if, any of the allegations were actually substantiated, then we would certainly add it to our database at that point.
The defense says this theory of the crime was never fully explored by law enforcement and that men they've identified as potential suspects were cleared too easily.
And after making those bombshell claims, the defense is off the case.
Coming up, graphic crime scene photos make their way to YouTube.
Pictures like that are just going to incite and enrage people, and they are going to blame the person that's under arrest.
In October of 2023, word gets out that crime scene photos have leaked, apparently from the office of Baldwin. And what it turns out had happened was that someone who was in his office had taken pictures of the evidence and shared them.
Thankfully, these things didn't make it out to the public en masse. For number one, for the families, like the nightmare of them getting online one day and opening up a picture of their daughter is like beyond words. The other thing is you worry about is if they get out, it destroys Rick Allen's opportunity to have a fair trial. It just does, because pictures like that are just going to incite and enrage people, and they are going to blame the person that's under arrest.
Defense attorney Andrew Baldwin says he's essentially the victim of a theft, but the judge is furious, and she accuses the defense team of being incompetent and negligent.
We've had an unexpected turn of events, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Baldwin made an oral motion to withdraw. I granted that oral motion to withdraw, and Mr. Rosie will be submitting a written motion to withdraw, I'm assuming within the next couple of days.
With Baldwin and Rosie off the case, Richard Allen still needs a defense. So Judge Gull appoints 2 attorneys from her home county of Allen County.
She picks Allen County's chief public defender, William Libredo, and Robert Scremin. But that's not the last that we hear of Rosie and Baldwin. They say they were coerced into leaving the case, and they fight to get back on.
So that issue goes to the Indiana Supreme Court, who quickly rule that the original defense team should have never been removed.
79 days after they were appointed, Libredo and Scremin are off the case, and Rosie and Baldwin are back.
I was asked to do a job, I did my job. I was then told 2 gentlemen are gonna take over, and it is what it is. My name's William Libredo. I am now Richard Allen's former lead counsel. I don't think Mr. Allen had anything to do with this.
You're a defense attorney, so that's your job to sort of say your client is innocent.
And rarely do I believe it. But in this particular case, I believe it, 100%.
And what convinced you?
Conversations with him, the fact that he lived in this very small community that's not much bigger than a high school. He worked at the CVS in Delphi. The police sketches are hung up in the CVS. The bridge guy picture is in the CVS. And in 5.5 years, no one comes into that store and says that kind of looks like you. I don't know if this has any relevance, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but an arrest was made 24, 27 days before a sheriff election.
How would you characterize the case as you know it against Richard Allen?
Well, it's obviously circumstantial. I haven't seen any direct evidence that, other than he admitted that he was on the bridge that day, and we think during the same time frame as the girls were.
There's technically both direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. For example, his confession, that's direct evidence. Witnesses, eyewitnesses seeing him, that'd be direct evidence.
Eyewitness testimony, inherently unreliable in my opinion. They all saw the same person, and you have that many different descriptions. That's a problem.
Rosie and Baldwin, in a filing, claimed the descriptions attributed to witnesses in the probable cause affidavit are wrong.
So remember the witness who said that she walked out to the bridge and saw a man standing on it, and then she passed what she believes were Abby and Libby as she was walking back to her car? Well, the defense says that the state left out that woman's description of the man she saw. She described a young man, possibly in his 20s, clean-shaven with a boyish look.
That description is actually what led to the second sketch, which was made in February of 2017, but not released until April of 2019.
And the witness who saw a man walking on the road, both muddy and bloody, actually just saw a man who was muddy, according to the defense.
Richard Allen's 5'4". So when you're talking about the witness statements, okay, and none of them, that would have been the first descriptive thing that I would have said is that he's really short. Not one of them said that he was a really short guy. And that would have been, like, to me, the first descriptor, you know, and it just didn't happen.
Bradley, Rosie, and Andrew Baldwin also said there's no electronic evidence linking him to the crime scene or the girls, and that there's no DNA of his at the scene. Is that accurate?
Yes, as far as I can tell, yes. Nothing forensically other than this bullet that they claim that they found, that they shot through a barrel, that there's no way to compare the markings a bullet projectile shell casing would have fired through a barrel compared to ejection marks. And it was, to my knowledge, about 2 inches underground.
What do you think is the biggest piece of evidence in this case?
There's an alleged confession. That's it to me.
You had not heard of Odinism when it first was floated with regard to this case?
I honestly thought it was hocus pocus. I honestly didn't, I'd never heard of it. And the more I got into it, that's a real thing. It is a real thing, and it's scary. I believe they sacrificed a girl and killed another one.
In addition to pointing the finger at several men who allegedly practice Odinism, the defense says that several of the prison guards in charge of Richard Allen were wearing Odinism patches on their uniform.
You described one of those officers that's mentioned in one of Rosie and Baldwin's filings, Sergeant Jones, who was wearing patches that said, "In Odin we trust," on his Department of Corrections uniform. The judge ordered the warden to make them stop. And then what did you notice?
That Mr. Jones had it tattooed under his right eye. From the best we can tell, it looks a lot like Odin's spear.
Both sets of Richard Allen's defense attorneys have raised issues about what they call harsh conditions behind bars. Rosie and Baldwin also allege that Richard Allen's family was threatened if he didn't confess.
There's no ties to this Odinistic cult whatsoever. He didn't even know that there was Odinists in Delphi. He had never heard of it.
Up next, did Abby and Libby's killer have help?
One of the major things hanging out there right now about this story is the fact that there are likely other people involved in this crime.
Hopefully justice for Abby and Libby will mean some closure for their family members. I always say you never get complete closure in a homicide case because there is a void left in your heart that can never, ever be filled. But some bit of closure, some bit of justice and peace, knowing that the right person has been held responsible and can't hurt anyone ever again. All that being said, the state of Indiana has mounted quite a case to prove that Richard Allen is that person.
I see a rose in bloom at the sight of you, oh, so priceless.
So this was a song that actually played at her funeral, and just the way that it describes I see you dressed in white, every wrong made right, it really makes me think of Abby as angelic. I feel connected to her. It just really makes me think that she's an angel by my side rather than the things that she went through and how she died. There are a lot of things that make me think of her. I got this tattoo of butterflies on my arm, and that was just a huge part of her. She loved butterflies. I think what is important is talking about who they were while they were living, and that's what's most important to me. I really want to make sure that people know that they were good people and that their lives are constantly part of everyone who knew them's lives. True justice would be that there would be no need for justice at all, that it never would have happened, that they never would have been taken from us, that they never would have been treated in that way. For me, there's a piece that really never will reach justice.
One of the major things hanging out there right now about this story is the fact that there are likely other people involved in this crime. Prosecutor Nick McClelland said that himself, there could be other actors involved. Former Sheriff Tobe Lesenby saying under oath that he believes it would have taken at least 2 people to commit this crime.
And you just have to hope that law enforcement is up to the task, because they're putting all their cards on the table with Rick Allen at this point, you know. But we still have that thing, don't we, sitting there saying we think that there were more involved. So we have to hope that they're continuing to investigate it.
It's easy in all this back and forth and debate about this case. Who did it, who didn't do it, who might have done it. It's easy to lose the victims, Abby and Libby. I learned early on and throughout that these girls were the absolute lights in the lives of those who loved them. Abby and Libby were loved. Justice in this case is going to mean different things to different people. I'm not going to presume to define that for those who love them. My definition is a little more traditional. It's arresting and punishing the person or people responsible for this, whoever that may be and however long that takes.